Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all the witnesses. Dr. Oppenheimer, in written testimony, Dr. Pielke asserts that the climate models used by the IPCC for projecting future societal and environmental impacts from climate change may not be reliable, and that by not accurately reporting the limitations of the climate models, the IPCC is giving policymakers a false sense of certainty about the climate future. It's my understanding that the climate models have improved since the previous assessment. So will you address how important are model projections to our understanding of the climate issue, and can you also discuss the current state of climate modeling? And I do have another couple of questions as well.
First of all, there are endless, and I mean endless and painful discussions in the underlying chapters about the uncertainties, which are mentioned in the summary for policymakers. Everybody is aware that projecting the future is a fraud activity, that we can be highly inaccurate, but we have tools and we use them as best we can. The difficulty, the fact of the matter is, though, that if you took the climate models and threw them away and never referred to them, there would be adequate evidence that Earth is changing, that the climate is changing, that much of that change is due to human activity, and that in the past such changes have wrought very substantial impacts which would be quite threatening to society if they were left unabated. That evidence comes from not only observations of climate change and change to ecosystems that those climate changes are causing, but also a very deep understanding of what are called paleoclimates, climates of 1,000, 10,000, a million years ago. Even without the evidence from models, we know that over time, large warming has been generally associated with changes in carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere. Those in the past were natural changes. The current changes are, by and large, faster, and the carbon dioxide levels have already reached a level which is above any for many million years.
And thank you. And I do want to also ask, you mentioned something about
Can I break in and make a comment?
I need to finish with my time with Dr. Botkin.
Okay, but I do want to disagree.
Well, somebody else can ask you. I wanted to ask Dr. Oppenheimer again, as I understand that the IPCC has fairly robust guidelines on how authors are to treat uncertainty as part of the assessment. So oftentimes in this committee and in Congress, we talk about uncertainty, and it's used sometimes as a tool to discredit in the field of climate science as a whole, as if any scientific theory that's less than 100% certain should be discredited. So what role does uncertainty play? How should it be considered in decision-making and considering the current climate conditions and the impacts of global climate change and ocean acidification that I know many of my constituents are already beginning to experience? Can you talk about the potential risks of inaction if we were to wait for 100% consensus or certainty on climate change?
Well, on the last point, we know that the lifetime of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, unless some genius invents a way to cost-effectively remove it from the atmosphere, is very long, ranging from hundreds to even longer, hundreds of years to even longer. And about 20% of the carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere today due to human activity will still be there 1,000 years from now, warming the climate. So there's an irreversibility in the system. Actions or lack thereof today make a commitment to what the climate will look like 10, 50, 100, 1,000 years from now.
And Dr. Oppenheimer, you suggest in your testimony that there's a way to improve transparency of the IPCC process, and that's to publish a record of significant divergent viewpoints. Now, Dr. Toll testified about outside challengers and that their advice is ignored. That's interesting because if there's an outside challenger, just because their view is not accepted does not mean they were ignored. They're considered and maybe not agreed with. But can you talk about your rationale for this suggestion to improve the transparency by publishing that record of divergent viewpoints? And how would that contribute to the assessment as a whole?
Yes, it would be healthy for everyone if everyone could measure who was saying what and what their view was and how it diverged from what was reported as the main view or the consensus, and people could make their own judgments. You, as our leaders, could make your own judgments about who to listen to and whose view made sense and why not. Right now, there's too much going on behind the curtain. I would like to lift that curtain and make it more public. I want to make one comment on the irreversibility question. Dr. Botkin says nothing is effectively irreversible. Well, if you lose ice from ice sheets and it raises sea level, that's irreversible on a timescale of 10,000 years. That's irreversible enough for me.
Thank you.
That's not actually irreversible.
And I only have 5 minutes and my time has expired. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.